Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Once again, my name is Jeremy Rossbach, and this is the NetOps Expert. But today, we're not talking about tech. We are shining a spotlight on compassion. Like our previous episodes, you may have heard that we've done. New Hope Girls was a wonderful story around the rescuing of endangered and trafficked girls in the Dominican Republic. And we have other episodes coming up. But today, we're going to talk about the compassionate way my guest, Mike Melillo, who is head of our NetOps business unit here under the Agile Operations Division at Broadcom, is helping out in his community and what everyone can do at the end of this podcast to help out as well. So, Mike, say hi to everyone.
Hey, everybody. I'm a long-time listener, first-time guest, Jeff.
All right. We love to hear that. Mike, can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do here at Broadcom?
Sure. So I run this business unit, Network Observability, Broadcom. I've been in this space for 25-ish years, monitoring, automation, running data centers, running networks, and I love what I do.
Wonderful. With that, we are actually going to stay on a technical topic, but it is a very compassionate way Mike is improving the lives in his community with tech. So, Mike, can you tell the audience just real quickly, and then we're going to dive real deep into what the topic is today. What are you doing in the community around tech to help the next generation?
All right, cool. So for a long time, I've been interested in social impact of digital transformation of technology. So back when I worked at CA Technologies, I was able to set up a relationship with the United Nations around the Sustainable Development Goals and the application of data and technology in achieving those things. And that was a great thing. But in the halls of the, bureaucrats and diplomats and the discussion, a lot of talking, but, getting outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember my mother was a Head Start teacher in Newark, New Jersey when I was younger. She always talked about, the real change happens at the point of education with young people, right? Mm-hmm. And they're open and there's so much to be done. And so when we joined Broadcom bought CA, right? And started to get to understand Broadcom. Now there's the Broadcom Foundation, long running foundation that sponsors STEM programs and ran the Broadcom Masters competition for a long time, and began to get involved with them because their mission was to sort of pivot and focus on building STEM programs in underrepresented, underprivileged communities, focused on sustainability and focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, which was something that kind of was near and dear to me. So we began working over the last couple of years. I have a particular youth center that I work with that I love, but just generally speaking, got involved in this process of educating kids, not just on the technology, but on the art of problem solving and the art of problem solving around their futures, around the sustainability of their society and of their planet. Mm-hmm. So that's the bigger picture.
Yeah. And it's funny because I recorded a podcast today that's going to come out in March. My guest was influenced by his mother too, who was helping out in a similar way in the same way he's helping out in his community. Look for that in March. But Mike, if some of the audience doesn't know, what does STEM stand for again?
Oh, science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
All right, wonderful. And it's funny because, in underprivileged communities, which is where most of the help is needed, you wouldn't think tech would be something that would be beneficial in that area, especially when there's hunger and poverty, et cetera. But tell me how tech can help the underprivileged communities and what you do particularly to give over to them when it comes to being compassionate that way.
Well, so you bring up an interesting point that there's a lot of foundational needs that must be met in certain communities. So why invest in the tech aspect of it, right? Technology is sort of the currency of the future for the young generation, right? Their ability to understand how it works, to speak the language of math, the language of coding, the language of engineering. And they are absolutely not given that in public school settings. It's very challenging, right? Budgets are limited. And then, of course, like within the households often, right, there's not the ability to have a laptop or things like that, right?
Mm.
So these kids are definitely at a deficit, right? And so if you're going to break a cycle of poverty, you need to be very serious about investing in the skill sets of the younger people who then can, go to universities or get good jobs in technology and so on, and then bring that back into the community. So all things equal are important. This is very important. And what I've noticed, the place that my family and I spent time working is the Renaissance Youth Center in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, right? And the South Bronx is the poorest congressional district in the United States. It's a tough place. My mother was adopted from an orphanage in the Bronx.
Mm.
It's it's a place of great potential, but really put in a tough position, right? And so they built this absolutely phenomenal center, and it focuses on, not just STEM, but arts and music, everything from teaching kids how to grow food to do and planning, zoology, astronomy. It has all of it there. And they get kids from, after school, they bring them in, they run them through programs. And some of these young people have been able to go and begin to establish themselves in good careers and come back into the community and provide mentorship in the center. And so we're starting to see this cycle that's formed around the center. But it all started with the ability for some kids who had no idea that coding or robotics or any of that stuff could have been interesting to them. But as the kids got involved in it, they started developing solutions for their community. So there's a man, Robert, who I had the privilege to bring to the United Nations. He spoke on a panel. I'll send you a picture. You can post a picture.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
This young man was so nervous, but we brought him because he went through the program and he built a drone that had carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide sensors on it. The Bronx has some of the highest rates of asthma in the world. And because it's right, the Cross Bronx Expressway drives right through this neighborhood. And it's just this sort of, the way it's structured is all the toxins in the air sit over the community that these kids are in. They all have asthma from it. So what he would do every day is he'd send this drone up over the Cross Bronx, take readings, post those readings on local social media groups. So everybody knew at the beginning of the day what kind of asthma condition essentially in the community. And now, the things he's achieving. He went in front of the group of the United Nations that was talking about social impact with technology. And he actually said to them that in these rooms, you all get together and talk about what should happen for the future, but you'd never have us kids in here. And it's our future. It was,
I think that's a huge and loud community response that a lot of the kids are saying right now, especially in today's turbulent times.
And they have a lot, they really have a lot to offer in terms of their ability to grasp these technologies in ways that you and we grew up with analog and we've made a decent transition to digital. These young people, they're born into it. It's all possible. Anything's possible. We'll teach them how to do it. Problem. But again, making that accessible to them is challenging. I'll say one thing, one of the great things that Broadcom has done with that center is during COVID, we sent them 300 laptops and set up the kids. So the ones that had to go home to take schooling at home, but had no laptops. And just to hear the kids talk about the difference that made in their lives.
These are great stories, especially not only for individuals who want to do more in the community, but vendors who should be doing more in their community. Mike, let's hear some other stories because I love, we have a tech angle to the spotlight on compassion, but it always goes back to building a foundation of what every child should need, right? Confidence, leadership skills, problem-solving skills like you. So let's hear some more stories, and then we're going to get into how it's impacted you and personally how you feel when you are giving over this type of compassion to the kids that probably need it the most. But let's hear some more stories.
More stories. Okay. All right. So there was a young lady who won the Broadcom Coding with Commitment Prize a few years ago. Lives in Arizona, and her area had been ravaged by wildfires and was convinced that there must be better ways to predict wildfires. So she basically used AI technology that she can get in the cloud, took a variety of data sets around aerial footage of wooded areas, dry, the humidity and weather data, different kinds of data sets. She kept putting them together to try to identify areas that were most prone and most likely to catch fire. And then started building a drone that could carry fire retardant so that as the system identified vulnerable areas, she could deploy her drones to go drop fire retardant in the area.
Oh
she did
goodness.
This when 15 years old.
Oh my goodness.
She also spoke at the UN. She's a firecracker. And now she's basically on tour going to events. And she goes to India, where she has set up her own community of impoverished children who she teaches STEM to herself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unbelievable.
Again, a full circle. That's beautiful.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
And you see a lot of what you see with these highly motivated kids who are getting into this is they have a community of which they are investing themselves. Like I mentioned, the young gentleman, Robert, he comes back to mentor the kids at the center that he went through. This young lady, her family's from this area of India. She goes back and she tries to help the kids there. And so at the Renaissance Youth Center, for instance, one of the biggest problems they have, and I've heard it from these organizations, is the continuity of investment of time. There's money, and corporations will give you some money. People will give you some money, but it's not what really makes the difference. Sure, you can buy some, Broadcom gives them laptops and Raspberry Pis. Donors give them money. They can buy stuff. But the missing ingredient is the mentor. The person that comes and spends time teaching the kids, helping them formulate experiments, helping them as they do their experimentation, judging the competitions. And the competition, very important part of it. Honestly, you mentioned leadership, communication skills, the idea of a science fair or a hackathon or, some structure that allows the child to experiment with purpose, to put together a product of something that they will present and communicate its value, to take critique, right? And ultimately be driven to win, right? To win. It's a whole thing together that is actually what kind of, some of these kids that go through it lights a fire, right? And then that sets them off on a trajectory. So putting that together takes a lot of adult energy and commitment.
Yeah. And you know what? You brought up a really good point that they are already digitally savvy. They just need the time with someone like a mentor like yourself and the tools. Giving money, giving laptops is great, but having someone give their time to them to help them build up and the tools that you're talking about, that's much more important than, just a handful of money, sent as a donation. It's the time spent with these kids that they probably, and I'm sure, value the most, and then want to come back and spend that same quality time with the kids that are coming up.
Right. So you model, everything is about modeling the right behavior, right? So having somebody, of course, you have your family that cares about you. You might have a teacher that cares, but to get, let's say, a successful professional in a field of technology or something, and that person comes and spends time with you, they don't have to. They don't get paid, right? It's not their job, but they do it. And then, they make a difference and they show you possibilities and they give you the feedback you need to get to that next level. And that person is modeling a certain behavior. And then that child becomes successful and they see the need to mentor in the community, and they provide that. And again, everything, right? Breaking cycles.
Yeah. And some of these kids may not have an adult that is present in their lives that gives them their time. Maybe they're just, trying to survive on their own or with some, kids in the community. But when an adult gives a child time, there is a saying out there, when a child isn't the center of someone's attention growing up, they search for it the rest of their lives. And this is where, we can have a big impact on our children. I'm currently working here in Phoenix with a local tennis foundation called Serve the Future. And they're doing the exact thing that you're doing, Mike. They found a community of underprivileged kids, many communities of underprivileged kids. And instead of using STEM, they're using tennis to build confidence, to build balance, and then some of these kids that have grown up in the community are actually now turning into tennis coaches and teaching the next generation of underprivileged kids the value of sports and confidence and balance. And so, yeah, pick your flavor, whatever it takes, I'm sure can make a big impact on the community. Any more stories you want to tell about the kids?
About the kids? Let's see. I mentioned Priya and Robert.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that strikes me about my family and ours time there at the Renaissance Center is, so we're out in Western New Jersey in the suburbs, and, it's kind of bucolic, and my kids go to a good school. They have a lot of opportunities afforded to them because of the infrastructure of our family and of the school and the community that they live in. Motivation, now
Mm-hmm.
into the Bronx. So we go visit the center, and I make sure to park kind of far away from the center so we can walk through the South Bronx. I want you to understand what this is like here. It's right. We're only an hour away from here, but this is what it's like. And it was a bit of an awakening, junkie, different things. I know we're on a podcast here, but I'll just say it as it is, right? If you've ever been there.
That's the reality of some of these communities, of course.
Yep. And, lack of safety is the first thing you feel. I feel uneasy. And we go into the center, and it's incredible. Again, I'll share some pictures you can share. The really mind-blowing place. And here's these kids building robots. There's a whole choir, and these kids are like top-level performers. And, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And I said, guys, these kids took the same walk to get here. They live in a general sense of lack of safety, lack of resources. That's hard, stressful. That must be stressful. Now, look at what they're doing here in this. How incredible are you? My kids were super impressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a little more motivation than you do. You have all these resources. You live in this nice thing. And it was an awakening for my kids to really, for a second, wait a second. I got all these advantages, and I'm not, and there's something to it though. Right. There really is something to it. And my hope in building the connections between my own family and this place is, help my gain a greater appreciation and more motivation. So, I think that would probably be my last story about it. About the center.
No, that's a good one too, because I love what you said about this is their everyday reality, and look how motivated they are to change that reality at this young of an age. I mean, a child should not have to worry about changing his reality, but that's what the fate of some of these communities are.
I think, I could see the strongest leaders and innovators, coming out of these situations. And if you go and you look at the spectrum of tech innovation over the last 200 years or so, you will find necessity in hard situations is often the thing that produces, certain breakthroughs.
And when you come from that hard situation, imagine the passion that is the driver to make a change instead of just maybe getting bigger revenue or whatever the case may be. Mike, my last question to you is, and it's probably one of my favorite, listen, we should all be doing anything we can in our communities, especially nowadays. And, a lot of spiritual leaders out there will tell you that doing things for others should be a selfless act, a egoless act, but we're human, right? And it makes us feel good to help our fellow humans. What is it doing for you, Mike? What is helping these kids doing for your soul, for your heart? And you mentioned, what the kids have seen, but let's talk about what it's doing for you.
Well, as a father, I have two boys. Right. And they're inheriting a bit of a mess. Generally, they're the generations inherit. Their only opportunity to actually overcome it will be through inventiveness and problem solving. And my biggest concern for this generation is most of their reality takes that away from them. A technology is abstracted away. Why do I need to know how it works? I push a button on my phone and it works, and, or whatever. I talk to something. And if too many of these kids live in that ignorant bliss of robots serving them and they don't know how to do it, where will the innovation come from? And my worst, you can kind of have the worst fears of where AI and things can go if none of the young people grow up knowing how to program, right? For that matter. So, I think about my kids, I think about their future. And then this to me is one of those core, forks in the road for us as a society. Either we're going to create a mastery of technology, the ability to invent in our children, or we're not. And based on how that goes, the future is going to look very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, let's say, pursuing this out of a desire to kind of feel good. For me, this is a bit more, I feel like it's a critical existential type of thing to work on.
Mm-hmm.
That's why with the foundation work, I think there's 50 or so STEM programs in the U.S. that they actively work on and expanding into around the world, working with the Raspberry Pi Foundation. There's a bunch of other really cool groups that focus on this, planting of seeds, so to speak, of these programs. So to me, that's the answer. And want to challenge corporate, America. Well, you got a lot of wasted laptops and phones and different things. You got a lot of charitable things. I don't know. What do they really do? If you got engineers in your company, how about volunteer as a science fair judge? How about mentors STEM program? If you're in the IT department, like at Broadcom, when all those laptops are done, clean them, put them, send them out to these youth centers, make sure the kids, right? And by the way, the guys in our IT department that do that, that's one of their favorite parts of their job. Right?
That's wonderful.
How great is it, right? Hundreds of laptops in the hands of kids, and then they get the kids sending letters and, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But this can be at scale, right? It's, it doesn't have to be a special thing. Oh, wow, what a special group that does that over here. Let's systematize these things more, people in tech make a lot of money these days. What are you doing with all this?
I couldn't agree more. And that's why we're doing this sidetrack on this podcast, a spotlight on compassion.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, of course. It's feeding my soul. It's filling my heart to hear these stories. And I hope it catches on. I know you said, it's not really about you and how you feel about it, but I know it touches your heart. It can't not. You're a human being.
I've gotten teary-eyed, obviously.
Exactly. And that's contagious.
Well, and there's a certain pride when you see a young person rising above circumstances, right? I mean, that is, or when you're just there and you see something click, because you can see the moment when something clicks.
Yeah.
Right? And then a couple months later, you get a note that, hey, that kid won their science fair, right? Got a scholarship, and that the progress that you see, it makes it all worth it.
Of course.
You model behavior, and you to mention the other guy's mother, and say my mother, as an educator, and there's something about those people, the people that pour themselves into that. We just need more of those people. And what a great way to retire too. If you're getting later in your career, there's better than that. That's what you should think about, right?
Start giving back. We do make a lot of money in this field, and we need to help and protect the next generation. I totally agree. Off the record, Mike, is there anything else you want to add before we close it out? Any CTAs or where people can go to figure out how to volunteer or do more?
All right. Well, I'll give you one. If you're in the New York City, New Jersey, tri-state area, donate and volunteer at the Renaissance Youth Center in the South Bronx. It's one of the best places in the world for what this is. Okay. That's number one. Or anywhere. You want to go renaissanceyouthcenter.org, donate to them. BroadcomFoundation.org. You can learn about the work of Broadcom, how we partner with Raspberry Pi Foundation to get resources into these STEM programs. And there are STEM programs all over the world. Through that site, you can also find affiliates that run programs around the world and volunteer in any way, any capacity. And a more abstract level, I would look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals and try to understand more, because a lot of that is focused on these types of communities, and there's a lot of resources that are needed. I'll just give people a variety of websites and go research, find out all about STEM and coding commitment.
That sounds wonderful. And we'll have all those URLs in the show notes. And again, the more I do the Spotlight on Compassion series, not only do I want to just share stories of how people are helping in their communities and hope it catches on. I hope it's contagious, but I do really challenge other vendors out there like Broadcom, and there are many, that may donate, may write a check, whatever the case may be. But if you get your feet on the ground and quote unquote, get your hands dirty, you have no idea the impact that it could have, not only in the community that you're serving, but on yourself as well. It's a huge, huge thing we need to be doing nowadays, especially in these turbulent times. And I do challenge all of us out there to put a little more effort into the underserved communities any way we can. So Mike Melillo from Broadcom, I want to thank you again for sharing your compassionate story and what you're doing in the community when it comes to involving tech in these underprivileged communities. And check out the show notes for the URLs we're going to put in there where you can do and make a difference in your community when it comes to tech and STEM. And please join us again on the next episode of the NetOps Expert.